So here we are, Kelly, 5 p.m. on the East Coast as this memo, this essentially new pause goes into effect. And some questions that remain about what exactly is being paused. The White House worked very hard to make very clear today, in their view, at the press briefing, they've had a couple of officials out on some of the cable news shows, that what they call individual assistance is not affected. That said, that doesn't necessarily answer all the questions that people have. Fair?
Yes, there are many questions, and we're getting a sense from various types of organizations that rely on this flow of already passed money that goes through federal grants to state programs and different things like that. They have questions because this is a very new approach, and the Trump administration is making clear that this is the imprint of the president's point of view on how federal government services should be provided. He is saying that in his executive orders already signed, he wants to draw a line against things that, in his view, with very politically charged language, DEI, woke, transgender issues, those kinds of things that are part of a culture sort of clash in our country, that those things that are getting funding would need to stop. And part of putting this out as of the top of the program here at the top of the hour, telling those agencies and departments that they must pause disbursement of money and provide a rationale by February 10th to the Office of Management and Budget to explain that the programs do not have those things. And so that's part of what we're seeing unfold tonight.
I'm interrupting you, Kelly, and I'm sorry to do that, because a thing has happened that sometimes happens, which is, as you are standing there getting ready for this live shot, some word has just come into us. That is right, some breaking news. I'm not going to make you riff on it, but I do want to share with our audience what this is, because it's our NBC News reporting here that a federal judge has now issued a stay, basically pressing pause on this pause until Monday. So 5:05, here we are with that literally coming in maybe the last 30 seconds or so.
Very interesting. Yes.
Well, it's interesting, and I want to read this. This is from our team here at NBC News, that it doesn't go into the legality of the freeze. So there have been legal challenges, we know, already against this federal funding pause. This administrative stay does not go to the legality of this. I believe this is from our justice producer, Dan Barnes. But it does give the court more time to get briefed, to hear arguments on some of these nonprofit groups' requests for this temporary restraining order that would last for 2 weeks. So all of that is to say, new date. It was 5 minutes ago, right, when this funding freeze thing was going to come to a head. It is now Monday at 11 a.m., which is when this hearing will be, that this will all come to a head. So, Kelly, all of which is to say, whatever was going to happen now is not going to happen based on what this federal judge has done. But all it does is, in some ways, kick the can down till Monday at least, right?
Well, it's an important demonstration of the fact that there are times when government needs to be predictable in how it interacts with its partners, which would be these recipient agencies and so forth. And some of what we've been hearing today as we've talked to various sources in nonprofits and in state government and so forth is, hey, we didn't know this was going to happen. What does it mean? And in effect, it would seem that the judge is saying there is a need for additional time. And as you point out, not getting into the underlying questions of who has the authority and how does it work. There are those on Capitol Hill who say the money appropriated was the purview of Congress, not the president. The White House here believes that the president has a lot of influence on how these agencies should respond. But the day of questions we've been living in, Hallie, is now evidenced by a judge saying pause on the pause. So we got the double pause going, and a chance to really look at this and to have a better understanding, so that whatever clearly there will be changes from the Trump administration and how they engage with the federal government, but it does at least put on hold some of the concerns that individuals might have, even though we're getting assurances from the White House that an individual check or payment would not be at stake. Clearly, they needed more information. And so there's been a rush coming out of the Trump White House to enact policies and to make an impact. And here is a speed bump in the process that will at least give a chance for some discussion and further information.
Kelly, all of what you said was really important, but especially this point that you're making about the president, this White House, having been clear that they did want to remake what the federal government looked like. I mean, that is in large part what Donald Trump ran on when he was a candidate. Now, as a president, he and his team are working to enact some of this. They were not unprepared, and presumably are not unprepared, for the legal challenges they are facing, not just on this issue, but on a slew of other actions that the president has looked to implement. That was never unexpected.
That's very true. And with the signing of various executive orders, part of what you're seeing is that now that President Trump has articulated policy views on various subjects, and we've seen a wide range of those, part of the administration is saying that when parts of the federal government are reacting to that, what they don't want to have happen, the Trump administration doesn't want any workaround or attempt to intervene or impede those policy objectives of Donald Trump. And that may have in part influenced moving on this OMB memo, the pause we've been discussing, even before there's an OMB director confirmed by the Senate. Right. So they want to make certain that the government is not working at odds with the new president. And that is a tension point that echoes from the first administration of Donald Trump, and is clearly something that he wants to avoid and to use whatever force and influence he has to prevent this time around.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.